So then eventually everybody comes together with IP, right? So that's the little short history of the TCP/IP, how it got how everybody started using it. But that red part, okay, well, first of all, let's talk about a keyboard. It takes that information from the hardware, and then it will either present it on the display, showing the pixels, or giving to the application for it to be processed. So it is a very special type of the software, but it's still software. And I don't know who coined it, but everybody said everything is software. Well, everything except the hardware is software, and the operating system is indeed software. And the red part, which makes everybody network aware, is once again this piece of software that runs on top of the hardware, like network interface card. Okay, so now with that networking module, the extension to the operating system, which is the red part, makes everybody network aware and everybody able to talk to the network. Okay, so that's where the story begins, and I'm scrolling down now. So then finally I can go ahead and draw out my OSI layer. So the OSI layer will look like this. It's that red part that I talked about. I'm just making it into blue. And I would also like for you to remember, right, that there is a computer sitting on top of this thing. Okay, and that computer has the operating system. So the operating system layers on top of it. Okay, and the application that you would call application sits on top of the operating system. And the reason why I'm talking about that is because with the OSI, people get confused sometimes if they don't know where OSI is supposed to, they're situated. They're not, above the operating system. They're below, they're supporting the operating system in making this, operating system network aware. That's all. Okay? On top of that, the OSI layers have 7 layers, which the very top one is called the application layer, which is a little confusing because people say, well, it's application layer. Yeah, it's application layer, but it's not that application. It's not the like Word or PowerPoint. Okay? So, as I just mentioned, 7 layers. By the way, I do expect you to participate in this, okay? So I'll be asking questions. Otherwise, this is going to be a very painful experience. I mean, it's going to be pretty dry, right? Okay, so layers is going to be 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. And no, you don't have to remember these names, not for CISSP, but I suggest you do because, look, everybody in the industry knows. Okay, so it's going to layer. Network layer, transport layer, session layer, implementation layer, and finally the application layer. Okay, so these are the names. And we'll be talking about what they do and the devices, okay, start to understand networking, and then at certain layer, well, in fact, in each of the layers we'll be talking about security, right? So don't think that this is just about OSI. We are going to actually going to be talking about the domain 4, which is networking. It's in there, okay? So I'm just mixing it in there right now. All right, so the physical layer is, oh, by the way, before we go in, so each of these things are layers, and you'll get this on the security engineering, which is the 3rd domain. Okay, there's a tendency for people to do design using layers. Okay? And the reason, one of the reasons why we do layers is because we can isolate functions within the layer. So if something happens in layer 3, okay, layer 4 and layer 2 actually doesn't have to know how network layer does what it does. It really doesn't have to know it, okay, as long as it does it, right, whatever the function it's assigned it. And lower layers will service the higher layers. So network layer will service the transport layer, just as the data link layer will service the network layer, that is, provide service for the higher layer. And the way they provide service for the higher layer is through the interfaces. So, for example, so that's a physical layer interface to the data link layer, and then you have the data link layer interfacing to the network layer, networking layer interfacing to the transport layer to the session layer to the presentation layer to the application layer, and finally, application layer to the operating system. And all these things are accomplished through an API. So it is a application programming interface, right? So these are interfaces, right? Interfaces. And another thing which will be important for you in the exam is that all these layers operate serially. That is, something had to be processed in the application layer before it can be processed in the presentation layer. And then it goes to the session, and then it goes to the transport. So you see how it goes in a serial way. It doesn't go parallel, it doesn't go concurrent. You have to go straight down and then straight up. So for example, if you have someone that you want to talk to, which they also have that 7 layers, okay, what they'll do then, of course, is they'll and usually, what do they do? Well, they want to do something with the network. So, for example, if this thing is a file server, okay, with a hard disk, and if you want to save that file in the file server, then you have the file or piece of the file, which you will call data, has to go down, logically go down on these layers and then travel across on any kind of cable, and then it has to logically go up. And in the end, it has to arrive right at the top of the operating system, working on the file server operating system, and then being saved right on the hard disk. So that's basically what we're looking for. And every time the data goes down one layer, okay, that layer is almost like it puts it in an envelope. It says, look, I don't need to know what the data is because, look, I only operate on the networking type of stuff. I don't care about the data, right? I'm just here to deliver, right? So it's like an envelope. So the data will always be there. So that is, data will be there at the application layer, right? The presentation layer. It's going to go down, right? It's going to go down this way. At the session layer, at the transport layer, at the data link layer, it's all the same thing. At the physical layer, and then this thing gets transported over. That's basically what happens. But in order for each of the layers to process and do whatever it needs to do with it, okay, at each of the layer, it's going to tag on additional information. So at the application layer, it's going to add on the application layer header and trailer. Remember now, you say, that's wrong, that's not what happens. Well, this is what happens in OSI. It is a little bit different in TCP/IP, but let me just go on, okay? And then, once you have that, now that header and the information with the header and trailer information comes down, and then the presentation layer puts its, presentation layer header, okay, and the presentation layer trailer, right? And that information goes down. Okay, and the session layer puts in additional session layer header information, session layer trailer information, and that goes down. Okay, and then the transport layer, and that goes down. Notice how it gets bigger and bigger. Envelope within an envelope. So then the data link layer puts a header information, and data link layer puts a trailer information, and then this whole thing travels across. Okay, so this process that we're going this way is called encapsulation. Okay, and obviously when it goes up, it does the opposite. So every time it hits someplace, it peels away the header and trailer information and then pushes it up and pushes up the layer, and then take away the header and trailer and pushes it up. And the reason why you have the header and trailer information is for each of the layers to put its own specific information that it needs to do whatever it needs to do at the network layer or the transport layer, and etc. Okay. Okay, so this is called encapsulation and de-encapsulation. And notice that at each of the layers, you have, although you do have data, but you have added information to it. So what do you call this thing? It's at each of the layer. Well, in the OSI, you call it PDUs. Okay, PDUs. So each of these things, each unit is called PDU. Okay, it's called Protocol Data Unit. Okay, in OSI, that's what it's called. Once again, that's not what it's called in TCP/IP, right? So when people, or maybe perhaps you and sometimes I do too, talk about and say, okay, well, we just got the packet, right? Well, packet has a very special meaning. So in this class, let's get kind of used to using the words in the right way, in the standard way, so that it's okay. You can call these things packets. It's just that know that when you talk about packets, it just means something very specific. Okay. Well, and we'll talk about what are packets when we talk about TCP/IP, because otherwise it really doesn't make too much sense. Okay. So now let's then talk about what are the functions, right, of these. Oh, by the way, one more thing. I did touch on it a little bit yesterday, so I kind of feel comfortable talking about it. I'm going to, let me see, I'm going to scroll to the right. Okay, we talked about interfaces, right? So the layers and how they interact are called interfaces, right? They talk through the interface. So what in the world is this thing called a protocol? What is a protocol? We hear that a lot. Okay. In the military, we have this officer called protocol officers. I'm not sure if you're familiar with it. But these protocol officers help, their higher-ranking officials when they visit foreign countries and foreign nations to make sure that their manners are proper, right? So when they go to Japan, they don't try to shake hands, but to bow, and vice versa for the Japanese generals. So that's a protocol officer. So you have to be speaking in the same language, same mannerisms, same behavior. Okay, so that's basically what a protocol is. So what is a protocol when we're talking about OSI layers, okay, or TCP/IP? Well, basically, if you have, right, so we talked about how you had a FTP client and FTP server. I said that these are applications, right? These are applications that's running on top of the operating system. You have an operating system. It can be written by anybody. The operating system doesn't have to be the same. But what they do have to agree upon is the fact that they speak FTP. And okay, in the OSI layer, FTP is right there. There's FTP and there's FTP right here. So the operating system interfaces with FTP, right? That's the proper language, right? And here it interfaces with FTP. And because of that, it allows for the applications to use the FTP. And logically, FTPs talk with each other this way. Okay? But in reality, though, of course, it has to go down the OSI layer and come up the OSI layer. But at the application layer, said, look, I know I have to be speaking FTP. And that horizontal connection, which is a logical connection, this is referred to as a protocol. Right. So the horizontal is a protocol, and you have to be speaking the same language, right? So if you are a browser, and if the other side is a web server, you have to be using HTTP as a protocol, or HTTPS as a protocol. You have to agree upon that. So right hand, left hand uses the same thing. And the up and down motion is called the interface. Okay, so that should be good with all the terminologies. Any questions on terminology so far? No, we're good? Okay. Now the exciting part. I'm going to move on with a different whiteboard. Okay, so